This week's blog post is my timeline for 1900 to 2021, Part 9, covering 1980 to 1989. This is the 9th in a series of 12 posts, which give an illustrated decade-by-decade timeline for the years 1900 to 2021. For more on the timeline, see the first post in the series. This post is a teaser. It is not the full text for 1980 to 89. To receive a PDF of the text for this decade, go to the URL that's at the bottom of the screen and ask to be added to my free email list. Alright, 1980s. From 1979 to 89, the USSR was at war in Afghanistan against militant Islamists, the Mujahideen. Continuing its policy of proxy wars against the USSR, the US sends aid to the Islamists beginning in 1979. 1980s, the moral majority began to rise. It was established in 1979 by Reverend Jerry Falwell. The moral majority promotes conservative Christian right views, arguing that politics and religion or morality should not be separated. The group favors family values, defense, and Israel. It opposes the Equal Rights Amendment, strategic arms limitation talks, abortion, pornography, gay rights, and more. Politically powerful in the 1980s, they helped get Reagan elected. The moral majority declines in the late 1980s when the moral crisis of the 1960s to 70s is perceived to have passed. In 1980, inflation peaks at 14.76%. 1983, Reagan drops détente in favor of a more aggressive stance, including the Strategic Defense Initiative, which is nicknamed by its enemies Star Wars. From the mid-1980s, cocaine and crack become popular. Drug cartels grow. Reagan accelerates the war on drugs with the slogan, "Just say no." In 1987, there is a stock market crash. The Dow Jones loses 22%. Also in 1987, environmental activists argue that the journey of the Mobro 4000 garbage barge is a sign of a solid waste disposal crisis. Recycling becomes mandatory in many localities by the 1990s. 1989. From April to June, at Tiananmen Square, 1 million Chinese students protest the corruption of the Chinese Communist Party's leadership. The protest is suppressed by army tanks. Death estimates range from several hundred to several thousand. It's China, so we don't know. In 1989, the collapse of communism in Eastern Europe begins after Gorbachev announces that the Soviets will no longer support military dictators with military force. In October comes the peaceful end of communist power in Hungary. In November, the Velvet Revolution in Czechoslovakia. In November, the gates of the Berlin Wall are opened. The wall itself is demolished the following year. And in December came the overthrow of Ceausescu in Romania. In science, technology, and health, 1981 saw the release of MS-DOS by Microsoft. Also in 1981, the AIDS epidemic was first recognized. In 1982, the first artificial heart was implanted. The Internet became global by 1989 when the World Wide Web concept was formalized. In books, we had, among many others, Tom Wolfe's The Bonfire of the Vanities, 1987, a satirical novel about ambition, racism, class, politics, and greed in 1980s New York City. The main character is a bond trader. We also had Salman Rushdie's The Satanic Verses, 1988, which was based in part on the life of Muhammad. It resulted in a fatwa against Rushdie and bombings of bookstores. Lee Iacocca published Iacocca, an autobiography, in 1984, describing the author's career with Ford and Chrysler. Robert E. Kowalski published The 8-Week Cholesterol Cure in 1987. So cholesterol was already considered a problem at that point, and has not been solved in the 40 years since. In the visual arts, Arturo Di Modica created Charging Bull in 1989. He created it after the 1987 stock market crash as, according to a flyer that he issued at the time, a symbol of the, quote, strength, power, and hope of the American people for the future, end of quote. Maya Lin created the Vietnam Veterans Memorial in 1982. It's a list of names inscribed on black granite slabs that are sunk below ground level. This memorial was enormously controversial and was the inspiration for dozens of non-figurative memorials since then. This decade also saw Jeff Koons creating his Rabbit, 1986, and other shiny metal balloon animals. Top grossing movies include Star Wars: The Empire Strikes Back, 1980, Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark, 1981, E.T. the Extraterrestrial, 1982, Top Gun, 1986, and Die Hard, 1988. There were 6 James Bond movies in those 10 years. And we also saw the appearance of Japanese anime for the first time. On TV, there was MTV, Dallas, Dynasty, Cheers. In music, the best-selling album artists include Michael Jackson, Madonna, Phil Collins, Queen, Prince, AC/DC, Bruce Springsteen, Bon Jovi, George Michael, Billy Joel, Whitney Houston, and the Rolling Stones. Popular styles include contemporary R&B, punk rock, heavy metal, grunge, new wave, goth, rap metal, glam metal, house or techno dance, new age, and hip-hop. Musicals of the 1980s include Andrew Lloyd Webber's Cats, 1981, and Phantom of the Opera, 1986. Stephen Sondheim wrote Sunday in the Park with George, 1984, and Into the Woods, 1987. Cajal Foll went on in 1986, and Les Miserables in 1987. And that's it for the 1980s. DianeDuranteWriter.com has hundreds of posts on sculpture, painting, architecture, and my other obsessions. To join the free Sunday Recommendations email list, visit the URL on the screen or email me. And you can say, "Well done, Diane," or support my work and receive rewards by means of the tip jar on DianeDuranteWriter.com. As always, thank you for listening.